Welcome to the Dad Challenge podcast. My name is Josh. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you had a great weekend. Well, some shit went down with Hillsong Church, and we are going to talk about it today. There's an Instagram called the Hillsong Kerfuffle that has been covering this. I've been following for a little while, and I've been sent this thing that happened. There's a whistleblower report on Hillsong. And actually, I'm going to show today that this is indicative of a lot of the churches that take after Hillsong. There's a church in Ottawa called My Church that's very similar. I've been talking about them for a little while. They've been hurting to be exposed for a little while. They're in the church that I served at, guys. I have a different view on this because I actually served at a church not as bad as this, but there's some shit that you gotta know. So Hillsong, I don't know if I said it in my last Hillsong video, but I said this is the year Hillsong goes down. And I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the nail in Hillsong's coffin. If not, they're going to completely be just demonstrably destroyed after this, because the amount of waste and fraud and everything else that this government official is saying Hillsong did in Australia and all over the world is actually mind-blowing. But it's not just Hillsong, everybody. This is how the modern megachurch works. And so let's talk about it. So I don't do a ton of church stuff on here, and I get really passionate about it. So guys, buckle up. This is going to be a long video because the document that got sent to me is massive. So an overview of what's actually happening is that Brian Houston, who is the founder of Hillsong. So Brian Houston's dad is Frank Houston, and he's being, according to Wikipedia, he has some sexual crimes against children. During Houston's tenure as lead Assemblies of God in New Zealand from 65 to 77, he abused many young boys in New Zealand and Australia. He routinely essayed one victim in Sydney from the ages of 7 to 12. In 1999, the boy's mother reported the abuse to church. At the time, Houston's son Brian was the national president of the Assemblies of God in Australia. This is Brian, okay? Upon hearing the report of the sexual abuse, Brian Houston immediately dismissed his father, forcing him to quietly resign from Sydney with a pension. Instead of sending this guy to jail for doing what he did, he got money for it, and his son did it, which is Brian Houston, the founder of Hillsong. By November 2000, internal church investigation had discovered several additional cases of child abuse. Although Brian Houston and the Assemblies of God Executive Council were legally obligated to report the crimes, they didn't do so. And Brian is being held accountable for that. There's some court stuff coming up for that. And he was told to step down from Hillsong basically because of that. In August 2007, further allegations emerged that Houston had essayed a trainee pastor during counseling sessions. In October 2014, Brian Houston admitted to a Sydney hearing of the Royal Commission that his father was guilty of other cases of essay against children. But his dad got a pension, got to retire, didn't go to jail. Brian Houston further expressed regret at not having reported his father to police when he learned of the abuse in 1999, but noted that other senior members of the church had known also and did nothing. So he threw everybody under the bus. One of the reasons they chose not to go to the police was because one of the victims requested they not report it. So that's one of the victims. There's many. Anyway, I had to say that just because that's kind of where this sets us off. The last time we talked about Hillsong, and as you know, and as you guys know, I'm an ex-pastor who comes from a church who was very like a megachurch. In Canada, was considered a megachurch. Okay, I actually loved Hillsong's music. I thought that their message and their thing was awesome. I drank the Kool-Aid like a lot of us worship pastors did. I went to the conferences. I went to their music concerts. I did everything. I played their music. I paid Hillsong to play their music because I chose the music my church would do on a Sunday. And as you know, worship music is worth billions and billions of dollars, okay? Some of the top worship musicians are multi-millionaires. Matt Redman, Chris Tomlin, Hillsong, Elevation. A lot of these churches make millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And don't forget, all of these churches, and I think, I could be wrong, are all nonprofit organizations who don't pay tax. They don't pay land tax. They don't have to. They are tax exempt to a certain degree because they do other things with their money. But most churches are tax exempt. They are not taxed by the government. Okay, and so when I pick a song on a Sunday morning, like let's say 10,000 Reasons or Oceans by Hillsong, I have to mark that in my little thing that I pay CCLI, that pays the artist and the writer and the church every time I play that. So on a Sunday, if there are 10,000 churches playing Oceans, which at the time every church was playing it, Oceans has made that church millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay, every church that played that song paid to play that song. Okay, the industry is hugely valuable. Okay, so Hillsong's main message isn't even Brian Houston. Like, Not everybody knows Brian Houston. Of course, he runs Hillsong, but Hillsong is known for its music. It's known for its program. It's known for its college. And those kids who go to the Hillsong college, they go to churches and they get hired because they are the emerging generation on the cutting edge of the technology and the music and everything else that goes into these churches who want to replicate what Hillsong is. But in the end, Hillsong, like all the other churches, are going to fall completely flat on their face because these churches are nothing but idolatrous palaces built in the image of the person that created them, not God, the pastors. Okay, these pastors are so wrong for what they do. They live hugely luxurious lifestyles. And just a slice of these people who do this. So here's the 10 richest U.S. pastors that will blow your mind. Joyce Meyer, who is the weirdest effing, weirdest person in the world. She's worth $8 million. She owns private jet and several homes. Frank Graham, worth $10 million. T.D. Jakes, $20 million. Rick Warren, $25 million. Billy Graham, $25, he's dead. Creflo Dollar, $27 million. Benny Hinn, $60 million. Joel Osteen, $100 million. This is a low estimate, everybody. More like $200 million. Pat Robertson, $100 million. Kenneth Copeland, $300 to $750 million. And Kenneth Copeland is one of the most demonic pastors of the generation that we all came from. Kenneth Copeland is going to have a lot to answer for when he meets Jesus, okay? I hope he actually does believe in Jesus, because otherwise, if hell exists, that's where Kenneth Copeland's going to be chilling out for the rest of his life. Well, burning out, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, you got these pastors who live luxurious lifestyles, and most of these pastors justify their lifestyle by being wealth and prosperity ministers, where they justify by saying God wants you to be rich, he wants you to be wealthy, and if you're not wealthy and healthy, then there's some kind of sin in your life holding you back from that. God wants everybody to live with luxurious yachts and 20,000 square foot mansions. He wants you to have a private airplane. He wants you to have private security. He wants all this shit. Except it's odd that the people that actually get that are the ones who run the churches who spread that message, and nobody actually inside the church does it. But it's great. It's crazy because it's a lot of where all the rich Christians go so they can justify their lifestyles. Because in the end, you know the old scripture, but it's easier for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. What that means is that people who have money are evil, inherently it's gonna be really hard for them to get into heaven, because money at its core is really hard to overcome as a Christian and not let it interfere and be toxic and cancerous to your soul. Money and the pursuit of it and power overcomes everything. It becomes the idolatry to these people. Money is everything to these people. Okay? And so Hillsong just happened to be the next one up on the chopping block. Mark my words, in the next 5 years, you're going to see the same thing happen to Elevation Church. Okay? Joel Osteen is going to fall pretty soon, because that guy is the biggest snake in the world as far as Christianity is concerned. These people are all terrible. But mark my words, everybody that follows this style of church is going to collapse. And I'm not saying it's because humans are calling them out. I'm saying it's because it's God's judgment. That's my opinion. I could be wrong about it. But this is God's judgment on the church that has become so idolatrous. Like the church, you think of the Catholic Church. And I posted this on Twitter the other day. I said, having a person like the Pope is idolatry. Change my mind, right? The modern sense of evangelical churches is almost on par now with Catholic churches compared to the things that they do. Now, Catholic Church is so far against the grain when it comes to what the Bible says, because the Catholic Church owns what? 20, 100 billion? We don't even know. It could be worth trillions of dollars. They have one person that they call infallible, which is the Pope, which is impossible to be, because the only infallible person that ever existed on earth was Jesus. Catholics are all about idolatry. No matter what you believe, Catholics are idolatry. It's a pay-to-play system to get into heaven, okay? Catholics are wrong, in my opinion, okay? But at its core, anybody who believes in Jesus, no matter what stripe, I mean Mormons, Catholics, Johos, Scientologists, if you truly believe in God and Jesus who said he was, you're good to go. And I've always said that from the beginning. But there's all this shit that goes on around all these places who are just trying to get your dollar. That's really all it's about. Okay? It's about power and money. And these churches, like Elevation and Hillsong and Bethel and all these big ones, they're all tied to the sense of this one mega pastor or the music that's tied behind it. And they all make hundreds of millions of dollars. And the thing is, when you're a nonprofit organization, you can't just be banking money. Okay, you're not allowed to just hoard money like Mormons have done and are being called out. By the way, I think SEC is calling them out. They're hoarding hundreds of billions of dollars. For what reason? Right? When you're a nonprofit entity, You're not just allowed to be holding on the money. They do the tax exempt status because you're supposed to get rid of your money. You're supposed to pay people. You're supposed to put it back into the community. You're supposed to, put out to missionaries. You're supposed to do good things with that money. The money that comes into churches, everybody, is God's money. And they'll tell you that too. But from my experience and what we're about to read here, that's absolutely not how churches run. Most churches, especially mega churches, most mega churches, and I'm not, guys, eliminate the small churches, but even though some of them are quite guilty of it too, but we're just talking about the big ones, okay? They have 2,000 plus members in them. They have salaried people that make a lot of money, okay? We're just talking about that for now. We're just going to keep that right there. But most of those churches give 10%, give or take a percentage or two, to actual programs and to helping their communities. You can do that, and you can find that out by going to any church. And they have to make their financials available. You might not know what a pastor makes because they won't make that available. It's not that granular, but a church needs to be telling the public and its members where the money is going when it comes in. Okay? And most members, when they sit these meetings, they don't know what's going on. The church has a way of hiding it. And that's what Hillsong did. My church was the same way. Now, my church wasn't as bad as other churches I've ever seen, but they spent so much money on shit that would blow your mind. Okay? Hillsong is going to be this perfect example of what happens. I remember going to North Point Church a couple of times because they let you go. If you're coming to see how they do things, they invite you in, they roll out the red carpet. Yeah, come on in. And I went to behind the scenes in the green rooms, and these green rooms are insanity. They're like gorgeous cafes with like exorbitant amounts of food and snacks and water and soda and like green rooms and like bathrooms and makeup and everything else, okay? Then they cater them. They cater this shit every Sunday because a lot of people are volunteers, but most of the people on stage are not volunteers. So not only are these people getting paid lots of money, but they're also coming in and they're being treated like rock stars, which, I used to believe that's cool because, I'd say that for volunteers. Like if you're coming to church to volunteer, let me celebrate you. Let me get you some breakfast, right? You're coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning. My teams, I brought that in. I said, my teams are volunteering. They're coming in super early. They're not getting a chance to get good breakfast. Let me feed you some breakfast. And so I implemented this thing where I spent a couple $100 a week and I fed my teams. And it was just a thank you to volunteers. So I'm not against that. But for the most part, these churches, the rich, they're like mini societies unto themselves. The rich inside them get richer. And you're going to see that soon. I know this is going to be a long video, okay? So here's what happened with the whistleblower. This is the whistleblower disclosure. Herein is whistleblower disclosure in relation to the conduct of public officers, trustees, and directors and all entities within the Hillsong Church in Australia. This shit gets crazy. I might have to do multiple videos on this. So the entities are the trustee for Hillsong Church Australia, Hillsong Care, Hillsong Childcare, Hillsong Church. These are all LTDs, everybody. These are all business identities unto themselves, under the umbrella of Hillsong International. Okay? The trustee for Hillsong, Hillsong International, Hillsong Media, Hillsong College, the trustee for Hillsong. Like, look at this. Just keeps going. The HC Australia Property Trust. That's a church that owns that. The trustee for Garden City Property Trust. The church owns that. Invordo Party, Shiloh Ministries. Like, look at this. Look at all the businesses. Holy shit. Okay? And that's just because the money needs to just go all over. And it was presented to Mr. Wilkie, okay, which is a politician in Australia who used his parliamentary, whatever it's called, to bring this forward. There is a significant improper state of affairs within the entire Hillsong Church Australia group, including serious financial and governance misconduct that contravenes and or abuses Australia's Corporations Act, Taxations Act, and Charities Act, and which represents a danger to the Australian public and the Australian financial system. The directors, trustees, and public officers of Hillsong Church Australia Group have engaged in the following types of misconduct. Get ready, bitches. Fraud. Yeah. Improperly using their positions to gain a personal advantage for themselves, their families, and their friends. This happens in church all the time. Church I came from, they will hire people's spouses and their kids and everything else. Churches always do this, okay? Churches are like mini kingdoms. A lot of pastors will pass that shit down to their kids. Isn't that nuts? And it should not be that way. It should be the best person gets the job, not the spouse of the person in the higher tier. The executive pastor of the church I left from, the guy you can hear in the recording, his wife is the kids pastor, and those two take home an exorbitant salary from the church, but it comes to one house, right? So that's just don't do it. And then the person they hired after me, they hired her because they hired her husband as the youth pastor, right? Just shouldn't do that shit. And it's so funny because I got fired, in my opinion, for taking parental leave. Okay? And I can't make this shit up. And since I've left, that woman has taken 2 parental leaves. I kid you not. All right. Not making decisions for a proper purpose, not exercising their powers or discharging their duties with due care, breaching and or deliberately circumventing Australian charity legislation, domestic and international money laundering. Note, this does not include proceeds of crime. Moving unreasonably large amounts of Australian tax-exempt income overseas to fund the operations of both Hillsong and non-Hillsong churches in other countries. One of those is in Ottawa. They're no longer affiliated with Hillsong, but they were. But the thing is, why it's called My Church, and that church wanted to become a Hillsong church, but the Hillsong doesn't pay them to do that. You have to pay Hillsong. It's like a franchise. So I don't know where they're getting that. If you want to be a Hillsong church, you pay Hillsong to be a part of that. As well as the extravagant lifestyles of overseas celebrity megachurch pastors. Thus, tax-exempt income underwritten by the Australian taxpayer is being used to create wealth for non-Australian churches and individual pastors. Shit. Breaching Australian legislation pertaining to trust, publicly ancillary funds, and registered cultural organizations and public benevolent institutions. Making false, misleading, and deceptive statements for the purpose of soliciting money from the public. That's every church, everybody. That's all of them. I'm sorry. They need their money to operate. Churches cannot operate without money, so can you blame them? Using tax-deductible income for purposes which legislation does not deem to be tax-deductible. And you'll see soon. Something like $150,000 vacation during COVID. Financial misrepresentation for the purposes of receiving JobKeeper grants. Significant conflicts of interest. So that's just the summary of what Hillsong is being accused of doing. The people perpetrating this misconduct include Peter Ridley, Chief Financial Officer for Hillsong Church. If your church has a CFO, in my opinion, it's not a church anymore. Now, I can understand that there needs to be oversight of money, but if you've got a CFO of a $100 billion corporation, no. That's not what God envisioned for his church. Tim Wincop, in-house legal counsel for Hillsong Church. This church had in-house lawyers. What do you need an in-house lawyer for a church for? And I'll say this again, I'll shout this from all the rooftops. And you've seen me do videos on this. If any church that you go to has an NDA, anywhere within its filing system, they've made somebody sign a non-disclosure agreement, exit that church immediately. There is no reason that a church that represents Christ should ever have silenced anybody for anything. Do you understand? That is completely against transparency. So if your church, and my church, a ton of them, probably 20 of them, if you can, and you can ask your leadership, does this church have any NDAs over anybody? And if they do, you exit immediately and give them the finger. Peter Ridley again. George Aganagian, current executive director for Hillsong Australia. Brian Houston, former chair of the Hillsong Australia. Philip Dooley, who's the current global senior pastor. So Philip Dooley right now is the current leader of Hillsong. And his shit's about to fall apart too. Darren Keto, current global ministries director. Ben Houston, which is current head pastor Hillsong Church Online, which is obviously one of the children and shouldn't be the pastor because nope. I mean, all the Houston kids, Joel Houston is one of the major writers for Hillsong music. And again, you know what? Probably the only person worthy of his position because he's actually a really good songwriter. Okay? But he's worth tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. Joel Houston, current co-CEO of Invoto Party, which is probably the music group. Non-executive director, just all the names. You guys can see them there. Private beneficiaries of Shiloh Ministries. Brian, Bobby, Laura, Peter. Laura is Bobby and Brian's daughter, by the way. So, SpaghettiOs. Okay, this disclosure contains a detailed summary document outlining the improper state of affairs mentioned above along with the associated evidence substantiating each individual claim. This is what we call, in the commentary world, receipts. Get ready for some receipts. All documentation included is essential to this disclosure so that effective forensic investigation in Hillsong's misconduct can be undertaken. This is because Hillsong's global corporate structure is so complex and hidden under several veils, both in Australia and other countries, that some wrongdoings cannot be identified in isolation. You hearing that? That is some of Hillsong's financial actions. That is, some of Hillsong's financial actions which relate to one entity in one financial year in one country may initially on face value seem to comply with the law. However, the misconduct can only be uncovered when an investigation extends across multiple related entities globally, different categories of documents, and several years. There are multiple examples of this summary document. For a simple example, see point 50. Let's continue. The visibility is even more crucial because several technical obstacles exist which block the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission, ACNC, as well as the Internal Revenue Services in the USA from conducting a thorough investigation of Hillsong. Thus, neither the ACNC or the IRS have legislative power, resources, or holistic insight required to fully uncover Hillsong's misconduct. This is such a big undertaking that the governmental institutions are too small to take them on. Holy shit balls. For example, Australian legislation allows basic religious charities to operate under a veil of secrecy where they do not need to make their financials visible to the public or the ACNC. Because the majority of Hillsong's wrongdoings conducted within its BRC entities, the trustee for Hillsong Church Australia, the trustee for Hillsong International, and all that, the ANC cannot request nor investigate their financials. So they're allowing churches to operate under a veil of secrecy. Why do churches need to operate under a veil of secrecy? Why? Why would any church need to do that? That's crazy to me. Brian and Bobby Houston's personal charity, Shiloh Ministries and Leadership Ministries, Inc., which prior to the resignation of Brian Houston were governed and managed by Hillsong staff as part of their Hillsong remuneration, as part of their payment, are also BRCs. And they have those. So they got booted out of Hillsong, but he got to keep his ministries, which were operated by Hillsong. You know, Brian Houston's got a lot of information on a lot of people. These guys are just trying to keep each other's secrets, is what they're trying to do at this point. They had to do what they had to do about Brian. Brian's like, you guys are going to take me down. I'm going to take you all down with me. There are going to be so many, there's going to be a chain of corruption and people going to jail unlike anything you've ever seen in any church you've ever seen. And I'm here for it. Your feet have failed here, Hillsong. Australian legislation allows small charities to not publicly report their financials. The charity size is determined by their annual income, not assets. A substantial amount of Hillsong's assets are held in property entities that do not earn income and are therefore deemed small charities. This is all those businesses they have. Thus, neither the ANC or public has visibility to the extent of Hillsong's assets, including cash reserves and property. So Hillsong owns so much property that ends up being little entities, like little industries, that see, Hillsong as a whole could have been investigated, but they break it up into millions of little ones so that they can't be investigated. Do you understand that? That's kind of what's happening here. The ACNC has no jurisdiction to revoke the charity status of any entity that is not federally regulated. Hillsong's main entities are trusts registered in NSW. For the ANC to be able to take serious action against a state-registered trust, they need to prove that Hillsong's entities are federally regulated. To do this, the ACNC must obtain constitutional advice through government solicitor. This is an expensive and time-consuming exercise, which is unlikely to happen. So the ACNC operates under a strict law of secrecy and cannot provide any information whatsoever to the public on findings from an investigation. So churches are protected even if they do get investigated. This is government. This is how this works, everybody. Start taxing churches that make over a certain amount of money. It's the easiest way to do this. It's the easiest way to keep people accountable. The only method by which the public will come to know about Hillsong's past misconduct is if their financial misconduct ends up in a public court case from a means other than the ACNC investigation. Further, if the ACNC does uncover misconduct, it will work hand in hand with the charity for as long as it takes to resolve their legislative breaches. It would be incredibly unlikely that any charges or penalties would ever be laid against Hillsong or their directors for their misconduct. And so that's where whistleblowers come in, everybody. They get to skirt all those rules. Whistleblowers are protected. Similar visibility obstacles also exist in the USA, so it's impossible for funds sent overseas from a Hillsong entity in Australia to be identified and tracked. That's crazy. That is, religious organizations in the USA are not required to make their financials public via Form 990, which was required from 501c3 charities. With highly remunerated with highly paid staff, such as Samaritan's Purse, led by Franklin Graham, are starting to change their status from that of a charity to that of a religious organization, so they don't have to file a Form 990. Holy shit. As salaries of the charity's top executives, conflicts of interest, private jet travel, and private benefits to directors must be reported in the form of 990. You hear what he's saying there? So all these, like Franklin Graham and all these people who are these churches, who are nonprofit charities, are now saying we're churches, and they don't have to sign the 990 to say, hey, our pastor flies on a private jet or spends this much money on this, or we spent this much money on that. These people are, I can't express this enough. That is criminal looking behavior that you're trying to hide funds. And don't forget, all of the churches and charities that they're talking about here, every single penny that they have at some point of origin comes from a tither, me or you, that go to a church, indirectly or directly. Okay, so if I play a Hillsong song at my church, the tithes that you pay to the church pays CCLI, CCLI pays Hillsong. Okay, so even churches that you don't think are paying Hillsong are paying Hillsong and other churches. Okay? Every one of these organizations does not exist without tithers. Okay, don't forget that at its core are people donating money. Further, Hillsong's non-religious entities in the USA have been established as limited liability corporations. This is churches as LLCs. In jurisdictions which do not require public reporting of financials, Hillsong makes it difficult for a member of the public to link the LLC to Hillsong and its directors by appointing someone as the LLC manager who is not a Hillsong board member or a well-known staff member. Holy shit, everybody. That is crazy. The lengths that Hillsong is going to hide their financials. The ACNC has recently introduced new rules which make it compulsory for charities to report the total pay of key personnel to their annual financial reports. However, BRCs and small charities are exempt from this requirement, which means Hillsong breaks its shit down into small BRCs so they can be exempt from that. Many other megachurches in Australia are following the steps of Hillsong by adopting the same organizational structure Hillsong uses to conduct its fraud, money laundering, and personal wealth creation. These include, but are not limited to, Kingdom City and its founder Mark Voorhees, Planet Shakers and its founder Russell Evans, City Point Church and its founder Mark Ramsey, Inspire Church, Numa Church, previously Bridge Church, and its founder Corey Turner. These people are all gonna fall. Change the rules then, government. Why are you making it easier for churches to rip people off? Why? You'll know why, because Hillsong has a long list of politicians that serve in the Australian Parliament, go to their church and are tied directly to the top leadership. That's why. Additionally, mega wealthy celebrity pastors from overseas are taking advantage of Australian tax exemptions by establishing Christian religious ministries in Australia that then feed income back to their overseas entities or spend the majority of their income on staff costs. These pastors include, but are not limited to, Joyce Meyer, Kenneth Copeland, Chris Joel Osteen, that douchebag, Creflo Dollar, Jesse Duplantis, and Christine Kane, probably a lot of others too. A formal parliamentary inquiry and or royal commission into the financial abuse being perpetrated by Hillsong and other megachurch and celebrity pastors like them is essential and urgently needed to stop the financial abuse of innocent Australians and the Australian taxation system. Amen. Further criminal charges may be warranted, as Hillsong may have engaged in illegal conduct by potentially paying for the silence of the board members involved in helping Brian Houston cover up his father's sexual abuse of minors. There also appears that over time there may have been other hush money payments made to the people who investigated Brian Houston's 2019 sexual misconduct at the Pullman Hotel. If you didn't know about that, look at my other Hillsong video. Basically, he was accused of being in another woman's room and saying he was on drugs, and it gets a little bit crazy, but he did some inappropriate shit as a pastor. In the public interest, the information contained in this disclosure is absolutely in the public interest for reasons including but not limited to the following. As Australia's largest megachurch, several years ago Hillsong created its own religious denomination. This allows them to operate with very little external oversight or accountability, along with minimal transparency obligations to both the general public and its own congregation. Its own congregation to whom pay the bills for Hillsong. At the same time, the Australian Charities Commission has little visibility into or power over religious charities. This enables Hillsong to control all public narratives pertaining to its finances, governance, and general operations, ensuring that the public knows only what Hillsong wants them to think. And if Hillsong wanted to be out there and be like, look, it's not what they're thinking, because Philly Dooley went up there this morning, Sunday morning, I know this was filmed yesterday, and said, no, it's not what they're saying, then release all your financials. Let's see it all. Why don't you get ahead of it and release it so we can all see for ourselves? Just by you standing up there, Phil Dooley, and saying it, nobody's going to believe you because of what we can see. And Phil Dooley's an asshole too, because he's taking part in the exact same bullshit and ripping off the exact same people as Brian Houston. The public has a right to be informed of the significant ways in which Hillsong has misled them about the integrity of its finances and governance. Over many years, the media and members of the public have accused Hillsong of having an improper state of affairs, including financial misconduct, but were unable to present the definitive evidence to prove their claims. In response, Hillsong regularly released official statements strongly refuting the accusations, thus publicly insinuating that the accusers were lying. And here's some links to those articles. We've always valued, this is what Hillsong says. And whenever a church has to come in front of people and start saying and making statements, automatically assume that the church is in the wrong. Okay? If they're making a vague statement about some shit, the church has done some shady shit. We've always valued good governance. So remember they said that. And we've always valued strong stewardship. Remember they said that. It's always been a value of Brian and Bobby. Our board and our management as our church has grown, and it's times where things are difficult like now that we can rely on those things, and actually they stand up with us to help us be in good stead. Now they're making these claims and they are lying to your fucking face. These people purportedly being instruments and voices and messages from God are literally lying to your fucking face. To your face. I just want to share with you our approach. When we look at our spending, we're very mindful of our stewardship. Hear the word stewardship. They're saying we're good with our money. No church is good with their money, by the way. I've never seen one. And in this season that is more important than ever, we are very mindful that we are stewarding and effectively spending in ministry is what you've gotten and what people in our church have sacrificially tithed or given. The Bible says, be as innocent as doves, but be as wise as snakes. In other words, do everything with integrity, but be smart about it. That line is very important because the church is saying we're innocent, but we're snakes. That's a wolf in sheep's clothing. These people are snakes. I don't think that the Bible pertains to that being like, rip off the government and your tithers. That's not what it means. We've been in a season where we've been consistently criticized as a church, never successfully as the media been able to accuse us of false dealing with finance because we try to do the right thing always. And holy shit, has the lid come off. That statement right there. We've been in a season where we've been consistently criticized, but never successfully accused. Well, that shit has changed as of now. One of the things we've always operated as a church is an open book policy because we are willing to be transparent around planning and use of our finances. Except no, you're not, because nobody knows because you don't have to disclose. They go on to say, now this is not Hillsong, this is now the document. The public has a right to know that the accusations of financial and governance misconduct previously made against Hillsong are legitimate and that the accusers were being truthful. This is a justification for those who called them out before. The public has a right to know and understand that Hillsong utilizes its public ancillary fund, cultural fund, and public benevolent institution predominantly for the benefit of itself and not for the benefit of the public, as well as in ways that breach legislation. Now, this is every church, guys, who's a mega church. Again, if a church doesn't want to disclose how much they give to charity or how much they give to overseas or to the local community, then leave the church. And if the church is giving 10%, leave the church. If your pastor of your church lives in a giant house and drives multiple cars and are living on the fat of the land, the milk and honey, while there are people in your church who are suffering, leave the church. Stop giving your money to mega churches. What is your problem? You enable these people by believing the bullshit that comes out of these snakes' mouths. Pastors here are the mouths of God, so to say, are the ones who are going to fucking just be so harshly judged for this. And I know they know that, but the money matters more. Isn't that crazy? Than your eternal salvation. Public needs to know that the funds they sacrificially donated to Hillsong were misused for purposes that were non-charitable, not for the purpose which the money was donated, and not in the best interest of the unique charitable entity, and not for the benefit of the Australian public. The public also has a right to know and understand that tax-exempt Australian charitable income is being used by Hillsong for the private benefit of board members, executives, and their friends and families, while also making its musicians and the celebrity pastors of other mega churches around the world mega rich and enabling their entitled and lavish lifestyles. Man, these people. I can't believe people still listen to these people. You need to wake up. Not saying you don't need to go to church, but you need to stop listening to these people. Man, there needs to be a movement of God that away from mega churches. Every person who has ever given money to Hillsong needs to know that a small percentage of their donations have provided any direct charitable benefit to the general public. And we're talking less than 1%. Or even the general church community, while even less was used for the benefit of community members in desperate financial, physical, or physiological need. Now, this is every church. I know this video is going to be, so I'm going to do 2 parts. So, what this means is that every church inside of its walls asks its members for money, and multiple times a year, and they ask for, and they say this term above and beyond. And I said this in my don't stop tithing to churches. They use this term above and beyond because they need something special. They need to make sure that you know that your normal tithe is what we need, but we need this above and beyond. Okay? And how many people do you know inside of a church have reached out to the church in times of need and have been denied or given nothing that they need? Okay? I know specifically in my church, many people who have left because they were in a time of need and they were given almost nothing. We'll pray for you. Right? It's so funny how when the church needs money, they ask, you for the money, but when you need money from the church, they say they'll pray for you. Okay, churches are so fucking wealthy in the Western culture that if someone came to you and said, look, I got this debt that's going to destroy my life because I got a divorce and something happened, can you help me? A church could pay for that in a whim. Like I'm talking about large mega churches, and not even be a tiny drop in the bucket, a line in an item. Okay, but they never will. They'll send you a couple meals. Maybe they'll give you a gift card to the grocery store here and there. But if you continue to ask and be someone who's needy, they're eventually just going to cut you off. That's just the way that goes, everybody. Okay? Churches don't help people, especially the people inside the church, unless you're a big benefactor. Okay? And the biggest benefactors have the loudest voices inside of churches, by the way. Holy shit, we could talk about this forever. Australian taxpayers need to know that if the large proportion of Hillsong's income not expended on direct charitable activities was instead taxed by the government, there would be significantly more funds available to the federal budget and the real urgent needs of currently facing Australian public. So he's saying if they were actually taxed, we'd have more money to give to other people because they're not doing it. The most recent Australian census revealed that in the not too distant future, almost half of Australians will not identify as religious at all. Thus, it is in the public's best interest of these non-religious Australians to understand that the tax exemptions and other benefits afforded to religious charities, such as Hillsong, are easily abused and rewarded, minimizing the amount of funds available to help keep vulnerable Australians who are not religious. Further, it's important to promote public understanding of the areas of federal and state legislation pertaining to charities, and the particular religious charities that are allowing Hillsong and other organizations like them to conduct their activities with little visibility, transparency, or accountability, which in turn facilitates their misuse of tax-exempt income. This will enable the public to advocate for legislative change. Churches should not be able to operate in the secret, in the dark, in the shadows. That's completely insular. That's completely opposite of what God wanted for his church. Do you think God and Jesus would be like, yeah, churches keep your shit hidden. We don't want to tell everybody what's going on. Why would a church have any reason to keep their financials hidden from people? Except they're all misusing it, right? Someone's like, holy shit, you paid $150,000 for a projector? Holy Toluties. You spent this much money on food for your staff parties? You took these staff to this thing and it cost $65,000. You did that. If you knew, holy shit, people wouldn't go to church anymore, man. And they know it. By understanding as a case study how Hillsong uses some of these loopholes in the legislation as well as the shields afforded to religious charities, the public can be equipped to advocate for the legislative changes needed to ensure that the best use of public resources can be secured. Basically it's a long thing to say, tax churches. By publicly exposing definitive evidence of Hillsong's improper state of affairs, it will help educate the public to be more vigilant with their due diligence when considering donating to Hillsong and other organizations like it. Vulnerable members of the community need to know not to place unbridled trust in organizations simply because, in fact, especially because it is classified as a religious organization. Because a church says they are operating for God, in my opinion, means that they should be more transparent. But often you're seeing that they're less transparent. And there's so much here. The Hillsong's new spiritual advisory team, handpicked by Phil and Lucinda Dooley, clearly have spiritual power and influence over Hillsong's board, staff, and congregation. This is very concerning because of the significant conflicts of interest involved with several of the spiritual advisors who earn private benefits from Hillsong Church, such as book and music royalties. Holy shit. Donations, speaking honorariums, and or professional advantages. It should be investigated if Phil or Lucinda Dooley receive any reciprocal benefits from the churches of these spiritual advisors, such as Cash Luna. There have been credible media reports accusing Cash Luna of corruption, with one publication reporting that Luna has received large amounts of cash, a Rolex watch, a Mercedes-Benz from a convicted drug dealer, Mallory Chacon. Woo, shit. If your pastor wears a watch that's more expensive than your car, tell that pastor to kiss my ass. Kiss Josh's ass. Summary document. Improper state of affairs. Hillsong Church and all its entities in Australia. Over many years, Hillsong is... This is the summary. Over many years, Hillsong has regularly stated publicly that it is high level of integrity and transparency when it comes to how they manage their finances. Such statements have included Hillsong Church responds to financial inquiries. Financial results are released to the public voluntarily via annual reports, similar to provide a transparent overview of church finances. Again, nope. And they only show you like huge line items. That's what they show you. In a letter written by and signed by Hillsong Global General Manager, the fact is that Hillsong Church and its related entities have always subscribed to a high level of accountability and transparency. Well, you're going to find out that that's not true. Important message from Pastor Brian Houston about Hillsong East Coast. Hillsong Church strongly refutes that our culture casually allows for such gross misuse of church funds. In fact, these stories are especially troubling since Hillsong has a record of excellence in financial accountability globally and an unwavering commitment to financial integrity. Just wait till you guys hear what they spent their money on. Sorry, your money on. We have always placed a high value on good governance and stewardship. Some of the ways that we uphold our commitment to financial accountability and stewardship are annual reports. Church annual reports. I dare you, if you guys go to any church, ask for your church's financial annual report and go take a look at it. Tell me what you find. Salaries, 60%. Miscellaneous. 200 grand. For what's miscellaneous? That church in Ottawa called my church, they have a miscellaneous fund of $50,000. They have 300 members. And it's odd that the wife of the pastor rocks $1,000 bags and does these events for women and red carpets and shit. They have nice cars and nice homes. $50,000 miscellaneous budget? Methinks some shit's coming down. CFO Peter Ridley said, one of the things we've always operated as a church is open book policy because we are willing to be transparent. Okay, again, they're just going to talk about how the church is that we're transparent. 2, Hillsong is not transparent in disclosing the fact that the financial statements they release publicly in their annual report each year. Can I click this? Here's Hillsong Australia's financial report. Are you ready? Read the full report. This is 2021's report. 84 pages. It's like a magazine. Let's go to it. The whole first part of the book is like, look at all the shit we've done with the money. And then they're like, oh, no, here's one page of the money. Look at this shit. Holy shit. Just tell me what you spent it on. That's what I want to know. Financials and governance. Here we go. 70 cents. Here's the sources of revenue from Hillsong. 77% donations. Other? What the fuck is other? Really? You're just going to put other? Okay. Services and events. Venue higher income. And then care programs. Programs and operations, how proceeds are spent. Programs and operations, 27%. Okay, great. How granular is that? What does that mean? You could do anything within a program and operation. That's fun. The money is fungible at this point. You're not going to know because this is what they're saying. Look at how clear we are. Look how transparent we are. Does that look transparent to you? Here it is. 2021 total revenue, $76,924,000. $80 million. Okay? Church and other benevolent activities, $69 million. How granular. Look at how transparent they are. This one line, which includes $70 million, okay? And the year previous was $75 million, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words they're telling you that they spent $70 million on last year. Statement of financial current assets. This is all their assets of 2021. They have $19 million left of $80 million. Cash receipts in the course of operations, $77,649,000. Cash payments to suppliers, oh my God, cash payments and suppliers, cash payments to suppliers and employees, $70 million. Of their $74 million budget, $70 million of it goes to salaries and suppliers. Oh my God! Which again is fungible at the point because a supplier could be anything. So there you go. That's, of all this magazine, that's their transparency for you. Thanks for the transparency. And the church will say, well, just go that. And we did, and we're seeing that, and now we're seeing that. No, it doesn't make any sense. It's absolutely not lining up. Where's the money going? We're going to find out soon. Hillsong is not transparent to closing. So plus tab 37 is in fact statement of comprehensive income compromising the combined financials of the following 4 Australian Hillsong entities. Okay. More detailed financials of this combined group can be seen at tab 57. Additionally, Hillsong is not transparent in closing its statement of comprehensive income does not include the income, expenditure, surplus, and assets of the following 14 Hillsong income earning entities in Australia. So that what you just saw doesn't include all this. So I think that they're saying that they're hiding money. So that the 80 million you saw, that's not all of it. This statement of comprehensive income does not comply with the level of transparency required by the Australian accounting standards. In a statement from editor Ernst & Young on page 85 of Hillsong Australia's report, it states, the summary financial support does not contain all the disclosures required by Australian accounting standards. They say it. Reading the summary financial report and the auditor's report therein is not a substitute for reading the audited combined financial report and the auditor's report therein. They do that and nobody fucking reads it. The following table shows the actual entire income earned by all Hillsong entities registered in Australia in 2021, along with each unique entity's expenditure, assets, and surplus. The entities highlighted in green are registered with the ACNC and basic religious charities, meaning they do not have to submit their financials. Okay? Here's the full financial account. Trustees for Hillsong Church, total income $60 million. Trustees for Hillsong International, $41 million. Hillsong Childcare, $3.2 million. Hillsong Church, $3.7 million. HC Australia Property Trust, $5.6 million. Hillsong College, $10.9 million. Church 180 Party, I don't know what that is, property, $1.2 million. The Hillsong Foundation Trust, $18.3 million. Hillsong City Care, $5.7 million. Okay, so the total, all told, is $160 million. So there's half the money they didn't show in their transparent financials that they show their members. Half the money doesn't show up there. Oh my gosh. Hills Christian Life Center does not have to submit its financials to the AZ because it's deemed to be a small charity because it has zero income. This means its assets and retained surplus are not publicly visible. Two of Hillsong's BRC entities, HC Australia Property Trust and the Trustee for Community Venues, exist solely to hold the property of Hillsong. HC Australia Property Trust owns the majority of Hillsong property, while Community Venues exist to hold Festival Hall, a building it purchased in Melbourne for $23 million in 2020, during the pandemic. In 2021 and 2020, the majority of HC Australia Property Trust expenses were property expenses. So that's just, again, I think I'm saying this right, is that Hillsong has a property part of its entity. And that property entity gets to claim things differently. It's broken down like that so that they don't have to tell you exactly what they're spending their money on. This is just a fancy way of hiding the money from the government and the people who tithe. In 2020, Australia Property Trust received $16 million in donations. This $16 million consisted of a donation of $13.34 from Hillsong Church Australia Trust, a $93,000 donation from Hillsong Childcare, and a $150,000 donation from Hillsong Childcare for Brisbane. So all the Hillsong entities are feeding into this one thing to buy it because they want to avoid the tax laws that work. So it's all one company. But it's broken down so many ways, in legal ways to do it, that you can't find out how it's doing it. Shit, that's shady. In 2020, HC Australia Property Trust donated $100,000 to Hills Christian Life Center to support operations and donated $448,000 to Hillsong Church Australia for the interest on intercompany loan. It's paying itself interest. The Hillsong is paying itself interest for money it loaned itself. Isn't that fraud? As of March 2022, HC Australia Property Trust owed Hills Christian Life Center $14 million for a related party loan, as well as $6 million to Hillsong Church. So why are they owing each other loans? Do you think that a person inside of a church saw that its church was loaning itself its money and then asking for its money back with interest? Do you think they'd be okay with that? It's unclear how HC Australia Property Trust and Trustee of Community Venues, which exists solely to hold the property of Hillsong, can be classified as basic religious charities by the ACNC, thus allowing them to hide their financials. So they're saying, how can this property trust be a charitable or church organization? It's unclear, they're saying. Guess we're going to get to the bottom of it. Hillsong's largest income-producing entity, not included in statements of comprehensive income in Hillsong's annual report, is the Trustee for Hillsong International, which in 2021 had a total income of $48.1 million. Hillsong International is the music and resources arm of Hillsong Australia. It exists to produce, promote, distribute, and sell Christian worship music, books, and training resources, while also conducting worship tours. Additionally, Hillsong International receipts income and pays expenditures for the operations of Hillsong Network, Hillsong Family, and Hillsong Channel. So their music branch alone of Hillsong, $41 million in 2021. Your church, if you donated to a church that plays Hillsong music, you paid that. Hillsong International's 2021 income of $41 million was raised from the following means: royalties and income, $12 million; training and resource revenue, not even $1 million; donations, $11 million. Let's be $11 million there. Government grants. This is like the PPP loan or the CERB that we had in Canada. It's the JobKeeper grant. They got a $2.4 million job grant. They didn't need it, but they got it. And other revenue, $15 million. What's other? From what? The donations Hillsong International receives are from three main sources: other Hillsong-related entities, Hillsong churches globally. So any other Hillsong church that needs to be part of it, they have to pay right? And then non-Hillsong churches around the world who are members of the Hillsong family, these churches donate 3% of their total annual tithes, income, and membership fees to Hillsong. There it is. They pay to be a part of the group. They don't get paid to do it. 3% capped at $100,000 in return for the privilege of being able to call themselves a Hillsong family church. For example, Judah Smith's church home is a member of the Hillsong family and donates $100,000 each year for their membership. Over many years, Hillsong Church in Australia and the USA has tax-exempt income to construct and fit out multiple music recording studios used by their on-staff musicians to write, produce, and publish Hillsong music. Hillsong International uses the same tax-free income to organize and host songwriter retreats for the sole purpose of writing new worship hits. Hillsong International also uses tax-exempt income to market its worship music and send the musicians on worship tours around the world to promote sales. This had many Hillsong musicians very wealthy from music royalties. Yes, they make a lot of money. And they use the church funds to promote the music to make the money. This should not be allowed. That should not be allowed. In December 2021, Hillsong had its music catalog, the ownership of which was previously secretly transferred from Hillsong Australia to an offshore Hillsong entity outside of Australia, valued between 120 and 150 million for the purpose of selling it. It is unclear if the Australian public will benefit any way from the sale of this catalog, which was created with Australian tax-exempt income over many years, or whether this income will be invested into Hillsong's new for-profit entity, Invordo. Well, shit. Invordo is a group of for-profit entities domiciled in both the USA and Australia. In Australia, Hillsong International is the sole member of Invordo, despite Invordo being a for-profit company. Many of its staff are employed by Hillsong International as pastors, Ben Field, and such receive tax-exempt income. My gosh. Invordo was the brainchild of Brian Houston's son Joel Houston and his best friend David Begary. Both are now co-CEOs of Invordo in Australia and managers of several IO LLC entities in the USA. The purpose of Invordo is to produce family-friendly media content, not necessarily religious-based, via film, music, and other media. Invordo's artist management division manages the solo music careers of Hillsong artists such as Taya, Benjamin Hastings, and Alex Pappas. In Australia, Invordo also runs a marketing agency. This is all built off of tax-exempt dollars paid for with tithing money, making other people rich to create content to make more people rich. If someone other than Joel Houston had brought the same business proposal requiring a $3 million investment to the Hillsong board in the midst of a global pandemic, it's unclear if it would have been approved. The board had previously approved Joel's dream of starting a Hillsong campus in New York in 2011 with his best friend at the time, Carl Lentz. Hillsong's investment into that dream hasn't turned out to be so great with public scandals arising pertaining to the financial and sexual misconduct, meaning that Hillsong New York City is currently running at a loss, propped up by the tax-exempt income of Hillsong Church Australia. So they're bleeding money at the expense of taxpayer Australian money. Hillsong's international expenses are categorized in the table below. Administration, $19 million. Royalties and expenses, $9 million. Resource expenses, $4 million. And mission expenses, $3.8 million. As of March 2022, Hillsong International owed $3 million to Hillsong Music and Resources. I don't understand how can it owe itself money. If the only donations Hillsong International receives is from other Hillsong-related entities, it received no donation from general public, and its commercial activities are material. It is possible that Hillsong International should be classified as a business rather than a charity. At the very least, Hillsong International could be considered ineligible to be registered as a BRC with the ACNC, meaning they would need to make their financials available to the ACNC. They don't want to do that. You know what? They say we show you everything. Show us everything then, Hillsong. Let's go, Dooley. Let's see it all, bruh. The above table shows in 2021 the cost of running the church and benevolent activities plus campus facilities and maintenance expenses outweighed the income Hillsong received from tithes by $5 million, $5.5 million. The table also shows that a deficit of approximately $1 million resulted from Hillsong holding its annual Color Conference and Worship and Creative Conference in 2021. It is not uncommon for Hillsong's conferences to make a loss, even in years not affected by COVID-19 when the conference is held in person. Donations are sought from the conference attendees to help cover the cost of the conference, but what the attendees do not know is that the reason that the conferences make a loss is due to the excessive amounts of honorariums Hillsong pays to the celebrity pastors they invite to speak to the conference. The excessive travel costs of these guests and their entitlements, such as green green room, catering, and gifts for guests. What the people who donate also do not know is that the money they contribute to Hillsong in the form of their weekly tithes is being used to backfill the conference budget deficit. So essentially, Hillsong congregation members are sacrificing things in their personal private lives to pay for designer gifts and large cash honorariums for celebrity pastors who are already mega rich. Tab 43 shows a detailed breakdown of Hillsong Church Australia expenditure under the category of church and other benevolent activities, which is seemingly the cost incurred to run the church. Here are some of those expenses. We're just getting into it, people. Shit. Now, we're getting into some things that they've spent. So hear this out. $82,000 afforded to pastors and executive staff as allowances to be used to purchase meals and beverages while hosting meetings. Guys, this is how churches run. My church did the same thing. If we ever had to stay for a meeting that had to go overnight, they would buy the meal. And I mean, I'm a small church, so the meal's like, what, $300, $400, $500? These people are spending $82,000 to feed people. Very expensive restaurants, drinks, and everything else. $26,000 was spent on entertainment. $37,000 spent on flowers. And $171,000 on gifts. $9,000 in guest relations, including gift hampers, $288,000 in honorariums to guest speakers, holy shit, $23,000 on catering for guests, $13,000 on high tea for color conference, $13,000 for a tea party, $14,500 on the color conference VIP lounge. That's a lounge for VIPs in a church, including gifts, and $10,000 for the green room and creative team catering on Sundays. Oh my God! Listen up. This is how it goes. Giveaways for Father's and Mother's Day totaled $50,000. Easter cost $115,000, and Christmas Eve and Christmas Day services cost $14,000. And that's just for that's not the productions, everybody. That's just extras. $228,000 was made in donations to external parties. Really? Churches are donating to external parties? For what reason? Politics. Hillsong special Sunday Night Live Sunday night at the movies service cost $28,000 in special production costs, while $22,500 went to Laura Houston's secret garden. I'm sure Laura Houston's secret garden is not worth $22,000. I'm saying, are you shitting me? The daughter of the main pastor got $22,000 to host a secret garden party? Special retreats cost $75,000. Conversely, the amount spent on helping people in need included just $2,900 for pastoral care direct costs. And that could mean the pastor's got to take someone up to dinner to see how they're doing, or give them a gift card for a grocery store or something like that, or use gas or whatever. And the $1,500 on pastoral care visitations. The Welcome to Church party for visitors and New People Church received investments of just $420. So right there, the people in need got $4,000, where Laura Houston got a secret garden party for $22,500. Despite Hillsong being a church that heavily relies on volunteers to run all its operations, only $6,400 was invested in volunteer development. And that could mean anything from here's a book to let's take you out for dinner and celebrate or whatever. $6,400 for, and most of these big churches run almost exclusively off volunteer hours. Okay? So that's a pittance of what they should be paid. At the same time, staffing costs, now we're not talking about volunteers, accounted for $22 million in salaries and wages. $21 million personal costs reimbursement, $1 million staff training and development, $137,000. And let's hear this out. So let's say the staff of this whole entity is 500. Okay? Let's say it's 500. Their volunteer power then in turn is probably close to 20 to 30,000. And so the staff development is $137,000 for 500 people, whereas development for the infrastructure of their volunteers is only $6,400. Man, I can't wait till the volunteers find out about that at Hillsong. In November 2021, the Hillsong Australia board approved a bottom line operating deficit of $9 million for the Hillsong Church Australia 2022 budget. That's because their shit's falling apart because of Brian. At the same time, the Hillsong Global Board approved a bottom line deficit of $3.4 million in the budget of Hillsong Global Group. By May 2022, the Hillsong Australia budget deficit had blown out to $13.8 million. That's because nobody's going anymore and you shouldn't. Hillsong needs to die. They need to die. They need to go away, and so do all the other churches just like it. This is the reckoning, everybody. In April 2022 and Q4 2021, financials for the Hillsong Global Group were presented. The global board, with a subsequent briefing note, informed that the forecasted cash flow deficit had blown out to 5.8. This included new costs of $2.5 million to move Hillsong College, USA from Phoenix to California, after Hillsong Phoenix separated from Hillsong Global due to Brian Houston's scandal. The Brian Houston scandal also impacted the budget with a loss of $1 million resulting from Hillsong Worship withdrawing from its USA tour with Casting Crowns so they could put the health and well-being of people on their team first. Still to be factored into the deficit at the time was the severance pay to Brian and Bobby Houston and Phil and Lucinda Dooley's salary as new global senior pastors. Fuck's sakes. This deficit occurred even after Hillsong Global drew fully on the $3 million loan secured from the USA in 2021 by Invorto to finance its startup operations across both USA. Oh my God, they got loans from the government. All right, we're going to come back to this. We're going to continue to talk about it. I want to go through this. I don't want to leave anything until I know these are long videos, but this is insanity. And at the end, maybe I'll do like one quick 10 to 15 minute video about all of the things to compile it so that we can have one video that we can all see. So guys, take a deep breath. Hillsong is asshole. Don't go there anymore. Stop. If your church is playing their music, make sure your church stops playing their music. Why are you playing Hillsong's music? You're feeding an entity that's committing fraud. Hold your church accountable, everybody, okay? Let's continue this tomorrow.